Hey food fans, welcome to Cooking Like a Pro with Chef Cal and me, Mrs. Chef, his wife Christa DeMercurio. We're dishing out culinary intuition, insights, and imagination to spice up your meals and make cooking more fun. On today's episode, my chef husband and I discuss how to make chicken piccata while learning the basics of a pan sauce, mystery box cooking, family cooking projects, and dense bean salads. Let's dig in. Today's episode was broadcast and recorded live on AM/FM radio.
Welcome, one and all, to Cooking Like a Pro. You have found us here, Chef Cal and Mrs. Chef Christa. I was talking with the Mrs. And I was like, okay, well, what would you like to talk about on the show today? And she mentioned a term that we've used before, but I really want to kind of break it down, and that's the term deglazing. Is there a particular reason that you wanted to chat about that?
Well, I think it's interesting that deglazing happens because you have glazed the pan. I don't think people think about that you've developed a glaze off of any type of a meat or whatever, that those bits, is it the fond across the bottom, everything that sticks to the bottom, that is flavor that you want to capture and keep. And I think a lot of people probably just take the meat out of the pan, sit it on the plate, and then wash everything else down the sink.
Yeah, you don't want the flavor going to the sink. And the idea of deglazing, when you thicken up a stock, boiled beef bones or chicken bones or turkey bones or clam shells, whatever it is, and derive that flavor out and then thicken that up, then we refer to that as a sauce. But you can make a sauce in the pan through this process of deglazing.
So called a pan sauce.
Pan sauce, exactly. So let's talk about, let's just go over an item maybe people may have heard before. It doesn't really matter about the specifics of it, but we're going to talk about chicken piccata. Okay, so that way we can kind of break it down into a particular recipe. So we're going to take this chicken breast and we're going to pound it out nice and even. One thing about chicken is that it's, especially breast, there's not a lot of fat in it, so it can dry out. You do not want to overcook it. So you want to pound that out to where when you put the chicken in there, it's the same thickness all the way across.
Because if you don't, you've got this big lobe with a big thick center and little itty-bitty thin, teeny tiny edges. Exactly.
So you want to pound that out, and let's say, generally speaking, we will usually lightly flour. You can or you can't. Lightly flouring will help two things: caramelize the exterior of the product you're sautéing, and it'll also, help tighten up, add a little bit of starch component. So it'll help tighten it up, but and also actually helps keep it from sticking a little bit as well. So we're going to take this chicken, we're going to get a pan, and then we're going to have our oil just barely coating the bottom, and we're going to get that to a point where it starts to glisten. You can put your hand over it and feel how hot it is. Maybe put your hands 5 or 6 inches above it, see if it's hot. You can flick a few little drops of water. If you do flick water into it, you want your fingers to be moist, not wet. Just dip them in water, kind of flick it off a little bit, and then flick into your pan. You don't want a lot of water going in there because it will splat.
And you'll have a mess all over your kitchen to clean up.
Yeah, exactly.
But also, thick bottom pan, or a cast iron, or a carbon steel pan. We're not talking a little thin pan. You need something that's got a good thick bottom on it.
Yeah, I definitely want to cook with thick bottom pans regardless of the material. So basically we're going to put this chicken breast down. It's slightly floured in a medium hot pan of oil. We're going to let that cook till it just starts to brown. We're going to add our garlic and our shallots. They're chopped up, and then we're going to flip that chicken over, and then we're going to deglaze it. Now in this case with the chicken piccata, I would deglaze with white wine. If you don't want to deglaze with wine, you can deglaze with a mixture of water and lemon juice.
So deglazing, just so people understand, you're taking that glaze, and by adding a liquid to it, you are pulling up all of those bits and flavor that are stuck to the pan in creating this flavorful sauce.
Exactly. So nothing's going to waste. So when you deglaze, again, as Mrs. Chef mentioned, it's just pulling all that flavor into that whatever that liquid, that broth is, and then you're cooking the chicken till it's ready, and you're going to add the rest of your ingredients. So in this case, with the chicken piccata, it would be a little bit of fresh lemon juice. It'd be your capers, a little parsley if you want, maybe a little salt and pepper, white pepper. And then go ahead and remove the chicken when done, and then you're just going to reduce this down. And we're going to add a little bit of cream. Now here's where it can be a little bit tricky, because when cream thickens up, it will, when cream reduces, it will thicken up. And so you have to bear that in mind as well. But if we wanted to tighten this up a little bit, because maybe it was a little looser than we wanted, then we would add what's called a beurre meunier. And a beurre meunier is kind of it literally in French it means kneaded butter, like kind of kneaded together. K-N-E-E-D, kneaded together. And you just throw little pieces of it in there, maybe the size of your pinky fingernail, not very big.
So they're kind of like little roux balls.
Yeah.
Balls of roux.
Except uncooked.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you're going to allow those to go ahead and tighten it up. You can do that also by maybe taking a butter pat and just rolling a butter pat in flour and throwing it in there. Butter pat, I think a lot of people know what those are. They're just the little pats of butter you get. Maybe if you go to a steakhouse and order a baked potato, maybe it comes with something like a butter pat.
So probably like a tablespoon of butter you would add?
I would probably again, it's going to depend on the amount of liquid that's in there, and you're not going to drown the chicken in wine, so there's probably not going to be all that much. So you're probably talking more like a half a teaspoon, and then especially with the cream, it's going to reduce. So we've got our capers, our garlic and shallots went in first. We flipped over our chicken. We added our white wine. We squeezed it with a little bit of lemon, flipped it over, squeezed it with a little bit of lemon juice. A little salt and pepper, a little bit of cream. Remove the chicken when done, when cooked all the way through, 160, 155, and rising, but you want a finished temperature of 160, so it's nice and juicy. And then you're just making your pan sauce. And again, that's when you're going to add your beurre meunier to kind of tighten it up. Again, in this particular idea, or recipe rather, we're using cream, so that's going to reduce. But let's say this was a steak, and you were making a little bit of a demi-glace or a brown sauce, you wouldn't have any other thickening agents in there. So then you would just, you might take it just a little bit more than this recipe. And then now remember, we're adding raw flour, so you want that starch flavor to cook out of the flour, and just reduce it. Here's one key, if you can remember this kind of generic, thought when it comes to cooking is, anytime you thicken something up, doesn't matter what it is, anytime you thicken something up, soup, stock, sauce, doesn't matter, anytime you thicken it up, you want to reduce the temperature. You reduce the temperature and allow it to just kind of simmer out, cook that starch flavor out. And the main reason for that is the fact that it's just easier to burn. If you got that really high temperature because you're sauteing, or you might want to use the term pan frying, but again, you want to reduce the temperature and allow that sauce to finish, and you're all set with chicken piccata.
Now, what else could you use besides cream? Could you add some cheese to thicken it up?
Yeah, you can thicken it up with some cheese, but cheese wouldn't be an ingredient for chicken piccata, but it could be used for a variety of things. So there you go, deglazing from the why, how, and when. Cooking Like a Pro, Chef Cal, Mrs. Chef. We will be taking a break and back in just a moment. Welcome back to Cooking Like a Pro, and hey, moving right along, we had a great discussion of deglazing. We're going to follow that up with cooking without a recipe. And the reason I wanted to chat about this is a lot of times we're just not going to take the time to pull out a recipe. And also, we're going to get to a point where we've understand a recipe enough, and we've developed it where we're very comfortable and confident with it, that we might want to just go ahead and make something and then kind of just, change it around a little bit.
Well, I think that's the great thing about making those pan sauces and deglazing, that you can pinch it something like you got some meat, you could deglaze it with a variety of different things, tighten it up, put it on the plate, boom, you can have something different every night.
Mm-hmm. We actually refer to that as intuitive cooking. You basically are exploring different flavors and different ideas, different thoughts, way things might kind of fall together, different techniques, different things that you've learned, and then just kind of taking it and making it your own. The other day, was cooking around the house and looking at what we happen to have.
Mystery box.
Mystery box. There you go. And I actually used 4 things up that were leftovers. We had some leftover spaghetti, and we had a little bit of Parmesan cheese. We had like a half a tomato. We had a little bit of salsa, and we had a couple pieces of meatloaf. So what I did is I took this spaghetti, and I just heated that up and added this salsa. I took that little half a tomato. I diced that up and threw it in there. Again, we don't want any foods going bad. We want to make sure that we use up our inventory. We don't want to throw anything away because that's a 100% waste. So again, we had the spaghetti, we had this diced tomato, this salsa, a little Parmesan cheese. I diced up that meatloaf. Actually, I broke it up with my fingers. Added some pepper flakes, a couple strips of bacon, and a little bit of cream. And we just took our spaghetti and turned it into bolognese.
Yeah, so basically you kind of extended the sauce
by
giving it a little more of a bulkier meat sauce.
Yep, exactly. So bolognese is an Italian meat sauce made with beef and pork. So bacon would be the pork component. But so we had 2 totally different dishes with the start of just one. So we just made spaghetti, and it doesn't taste a whole lot like spaghetti because we took it in a different direction.
It was very good. That was our lunch today.
Yeah. So again, it's playing around with things. It's being experimenting and being experimental. And one of the things that helps you is kind of learning how to layer those flavors and kind of understanding what the different flavors are. Now remember, we have what our tongue picks up, our sweet, our sour, right, our salty, our bitter, and then our umami. Those are the 5 things that it picks up. And then just think, okay, what do I want to add to this? And then think of an ingredient. Okay, just taste it. Taste something that's in front of you and say, you know what, I wish this was a little sweeter. Well, so add some honey. Maybe it's got a variety of other things, but maybe we want to add some honey. Maybe you want to chop up and add a dried date to it. I mean, something that's got a lot of sweetness to it, as opposed to just adding sugar. Sour, if you wanted to add some sour components, you could add, mustard is mostly all vinegar, so that's going to be sour. So any type of vinegar, a little bit of red wine vinegar. So you taste a dish and say, ooh, I'd like some sour. Well, maybe put a little splash of vinegar in there.
Well, the other night, I took leftovers from 3 different meals, just like you did. We had asparagus with one meal. We still had a couple portions left over. We had polenta with another meal, still had several portions left over. And then I took those 2 things and combined them with yet a third item from another meal with some fish and pulled together a whole different meal, but taking 3 different components from 3 different meals and just mixing together and then changing the flavor of the polenta a little bit. I put a little bit of miso paste in it to give it a little more umami flavor, and then I add a little bit more water and a little more stock to make it a little looser. So you can take something and then just change it just a little bit.
Yeah, let's say you want to add bitter. You want to make something a little more bitter. Let's say you have a nice salad, but you're like, gosh, this salad has all these components, but maybe just a touch of bitterness. Well, maybe then you mix in some greens, mix in some sprouts, give it a little bit of that fiery, peppery, kind of a spicy kind of a flavor. If you want something to be umami, remember umami is that description of a flavor that's kind of meaty in it. And a couple of things that we always think about, and that are kind of go-tos when it comes to umami are bell peppers and
mushrooms.
And mushrooms. Yeah. Both those work. If you ever grilled like a portobello mushroom, if you do it right, that thing's coming out like steak.
Especially if you barbecue it, put a little mesquite smoke flavoring on it. Yeah. Well, now they're doing cauliflower steaks too.
Cauliflower steaks.
Yeah, they're a big new thing.
Well, so there's just think about, the cooking process. For example, if you're going to do a cauliflower steak, I would blanch it first, season it, and then grill it. One of the things about grilling things that are completely raw or cooking things from a raw state, is they may not cook all the way through. Like in the middle, it might be a little more, texturally challenged than the outside. Might be a little crunchy. You want it al dente all the way through, and you can control that by just simply blanching it first.
And that's where combination cooking gets to be a lot of fun. You're adding 2 different cooking methods to one item.
Yeah. Well, so you just have to learn all the cooking methods, and you're set.
And that is in the veggie cookbook. We talk about combination cooking and that a lot.
The vegetable makeover. Yeah, we have an ebook that you can get by going to Culinarily Yours. How exactly do they find that? Explain it to someone like me that doesn't even like an iPhone.
Go to culinarlyyours.net. And there's right there this pop-up. You can get a discount. You can also go into our shop and buy it. It's very easy. You just click in there, add your email, and
Culinarily Yours. Hey, go on to Culinarily Yours and just kind of fish around and look around. I know we have a barbecue. I mean, it's not quite barbecue season, but we do it. It will be here eventually. And
yeah, and that's like the barbecue sauce. I was talking earlier, taking one base flavor and then taking it in a little different direction, taking a barbecue sauce and maybe adding some ginger to it, taking some barbecue sauce, adding a little bit of peach jam to it. So that's the same thing with when you're learning to come up with things out of the blue, taking one base item that you are comfortable with, and then maybe adding one additional little flavor to it that might take it in an Asian direction or in a Mexican direction or in an Italian direction, but take something that's base and neutral that you're comfortable cooking and then go a different route with it.
Yeah. And think about the protein. And I mean, is it a protein that works well as far as a sweeter item like pork, pork chops and applesauce. So you could use pork, and whether it was grilled apples or chopped apples or an apple compote or
pineapple
or any other type of fruit. Anything that's got that sweetness, because pork just, and chicken will absorb that well or marry together well. I think the pork's probably better. I don't use a lot of fruit when it comes to beef. I might use currants or
maybe some cherries,
maybe raspberry.
Raspberry, okay.
Yeah, raspberry's a good one for beef. But just kind of understanding what works. I think a lot of this really comes down to kind of the art of seasoning. Learning balance. Be thinking about when you taste it, because remember, you're going to taste this before your guests are going to taste it. So if there's a time to change it or fix it or adjust it, it's before you serve it. So I know that everywhere I've ever worked, I've put containers of tasting spoons all over the kitchen, because I want people to taste it. Because just because I've made something countless times, I don't know, maybe the tomatoes aren't as ripe as they usually are when I do this, or maybe it's a different type of maybe even a canned tomato than normal, or a different season where something might be fresher or something might be less fresh. So be thinking about those things. But think about, how am I going to balance this? Does it need more salt, acid, fat, heat? Does it need more heat? Well, this would be great if it needed more heat. Well, there's a big difference in heat if I'm going to add Tabasco sauce versus the heat if I'm going to add some chili flakes, versus the heat if I'm going to add some sambal leek, or versus the heat if I'm going to add some garlic paste. So you have to kind of be thinking about, if I'm going to add heat, am I going to do it by adding some crushed ginger?
And you don't have to add a whole lot.
Oh, no.
You don't have to, the pasta you made today, it was a tad warm for me. It was with me with the chili flakes. It was right on my top of my heat index, but I don't think it would have tasted as good without that little bit of heat, because it does just get your taste buds going and wanting you to, drink and eat more.
Yeah. Well, and I think if you're going to satisfy, if you're going to have a flavor profile that's satisfying, I think that satisfaction comes in a balance of everything. It's not overly salty, overly bitter, overly, sour, or overly umami, or overly sweet. I mean, there's a balance, and that's what you're looking for. Is you're looking for that balance. That doesn't mean it might not be on the sweet side if it's a dish that's meant to be sweet, but either way, you want it to be balanced.
And you don't want too much of any flavor, because you get those taste buds being overwhelmed. Right? I just can't eat any more of this. It's probably why at the end of time, we get to dessert, we're so looking for something else to eat, because we've had so much salty or so much sour. It's like, I just need a little something sweet to take me in a different direction, so I'm not overwhelmed with too many flavors in one direction.
So things to think about, and we're going to go ahead and take another break here at the bottom of the hour. Again, we really appreciate you listening to Cooking Like a Pro, and we are going to be back in just a moment. Welcome back to Cooking Like a Pro. Something else I wanted to talk about was cooking projects, because I think this can be a lot of fun, and make those on the weekend when you have time. You have time a little extra time to make something fun. You might be making something that's going to, go through it later on in the week. But things like bread. I know that you like to make bread. I know Mrs. Chef likes to make bread.
Not a midweek thing to make.
Yeah, it's not something that you want to make when you're rushed.
Yeah, no, it takes time.
But also making pasta. Now, making pasta is real simple. It's really easy, and it's also real fast. But it's fun, and it's something that the family can do together. And one of the things that I make sure that I've always done as a cook, as a home cook, is to show my family what I'm making. Because I want them to be able to know for the rest of their lives that this is how you make it. A cheesecake, or this is how you make it, because that will stick with them, and their menus will start to expand.
How about making pizza?
Making pizza, another thing, because you're making a dough, just like you're making bread, and depending on whether you want to make a deep dish, I mean, you can almost use a focaccia bread. Some of the other things that we do as families, tamales. Tamales is always a family thing, something that's just fun, kind of like a crab feast. A Wellington, we talked about that last week, something that's going to be a little more complicated, but you can make it together and you can have some fun and learn as a family. Things like homemade sauerkraut, kimchi, even condiments or sides, work real well. Like in our family, we've always made our own pickles. I know that Mrs. Chef has always made her own pickles too, with Dad, and bread and butter pickles, the best bread and butter pickles, and olives. Mom and Dad used to always make olives. We were raised on our own homemade olives. But again, it's just find something and make that like a project. Make that some kind of a fun family event.
I think the most memorable thing I can remember growing up is when we got out the ice cream churner.
I've never found an ice cream that was made in a retail setting or in any business that tastes as authentic as making a French vanilla ice cream. And remember, ice cream is just custard that is churned to add, creaminess and air to it. Not as much creaminess as a gelato. But homemade ice cream, you got that unique cream flavor that you just can't really get out of anything else.
There's a different iciness to it. And depending upon the maker you use, we have a Dawn VA one that you can't really find too much anymore. That's a hand crank that you use in the freezer. You can get one that's an attachment to your KitchenAid. I remember the bucket one.
Yeah.
You'd have to put the ice and the salt in.
Rock salt and ice.
Yeah,
I
think it was the Rival, and it had the thing that went across the top and locked in. They'd sit there and
it's like a wood bucket.
It was like a wood bucket.
Yeah, that was the best.
It was
the
there
best.
on the counter.
Actually, my mom's brother Richard used to always make I remember he always made the homemade ice cream, and it just sets off everything else. The pie a la mode that's coming along with it, or the cake a la mode, to have that wonderful flavor of homemade ice cream is. And again, that's a real fun project. Especially in the old days, because you had to take turn cranking. Like one kid, couldn't crank it all, but the salt. I think that'd be something that'd be fun to do, with the modern version of an ice cream churner, but
find an old-fashioned hand crank. That's why I like the Dawn VA one.
Yeah.
You could do it by hand, and it takes time. It takes an hour.
Yeah.
You trade off every couple of minutes of who's going to get to turn the crank.
How about making your own butter? Another simple thing that I always think of, like the people out on the prairie. I don't know why that is, but churning butter with using fresh cream. Like I know that we used to get extra cream in our milk. It used to be just massive cream because our milk was delivered in glass bottles and left on the porch, and back in the day. And this was just the best milk ever. And I remember that we would get so much calcium out of that when we quit getting the fresh milk, I was talking to my dad, and he told me the story about how many challenges we started having with needing with a lack of calcium, because our bodies were so used to getting that fresh cream. Just amazing stuff. So.
Yeah, if you can find raw milk is amazing.
Mm-hmm. We're going to take a quick break. Cooking Like a Pro. We'll be back in just a moment. Well, welcome back, Cooking Like a Pro. Hey, you've made it this far. You've made it to the final segment. We appreciate you listening and Cooking Like a Pro. Again, Chef Cal and Mrs. Chef. And Mrs. Chef here has been wanting to talk about something that she came across, and you call it a bound salad. Now, real quick before I let her take over here, the salads, we categorize them when we're training into things that we call like lettuce salads, so anything that has a lettuce base to it. And then we have what's called bound salads. These are salads that are bound in something. They're bound together by generally something like, mayonnaise. They're bound together. So they're like, potato salad, macaroni salad, those type of things, coleslaw. So those are what we call bound salads. Now, one of the things that you're seeing a lot now, and I think this is really that trend of people desiring to eat healthy and also experimenting and some different things out there, because there's just so many different things you can go, and these are all real healthy alternatives.
Yeah, there's a new thing that kind of went wild on TikTok, and I checked today, it's still going pretty wild. She's got like almost 3 million followers. Her name was Violet Witchell, and she started something called the dense bean salad craze.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so I grew up with the traditional 3 bean, green bean, kidney bean, and garbanzo in a vinaigrette, right?
3 or 4 beans, whatever's in there.
Or as I was growing up, a 2 bean salad, because I could not stand garbanzo beans. I would just do kidney beans and green beans in mine.
Yeah. Well, I would use the wax beans.
Yeah.
Wax and green.
Yeah, so you have the different colors. You'd have the red and the white and the green.
Yeah.
But now...
But wait a minute, now you eat hummus like it's going out of style.
I knew you were going to call me on that, but...
So why are you calling out garbanzos here when you eat hummus?
So to me, a garbanzo that's whole, straight out of the fridge, has horrible texture to me. But if you grind it up with creamy garlic and oil and vinegar, it's totally different to me. So
okay, all right, back bound salads. So bean salads.
Okay, so it's a bean salad as your base.
Okay.
Instead of lettuce or potatoes or tuna salad, it's a bean salad. But then you start adding your extra proteins of meat, diced up chicken and steak and things like that. And you can also add corn. Then you add cucumbers and tomatoes and toss it in a vinaigrette. And
just pile it right on your plate, huh?
And because, think about how long a bean salad lasts in the fridge.
Yeah.
It lasts a really long time. So
Well, it does if it has vinegar in it. The vinegar's what...
Yeah, so you have to have the vinaigrette with it to hold it. But a lot of times you'll make it at the beginning of the week, portion it out, and you'll have salads throughout the week to take to work.
What other, grains I would imagine would be popular?
Sometimes you can mix in some grains, maybe a little bit of pasta.
Yeah, I think of things like couscous, barley, variety of those. Israeli couscous is a real nice one that you can use. Quinoa, a lot of things out there that you can mix in there.
Well, there's different beans. So one of the things that helps, though, is that they are canned beans. So it's quick and easy. You're not cooking beans from scratch. You're using canned beans. And I have a question for you.
Sure.
Rinse the beans or not? Drain the beans or not? I always grew up learning that she would drain the beans and you would rinse them. But when you get into vegan cooking, what they call the aquafaba, the water that's poured off, is used in a lot of vegan cuisines. So, in your mind, should a bean out of a can be rinsed?
Well, it's the same thought with mashed potatoes. You boil your potatoes. A lot of people will use that water. Same thing with pasta water. They'll use that as opposed to throwing it away. But I don't know. I think I would always dump it out. I wouldn't rinse them because then you're rinsing flavor off. I would dump and just let them drain by their own weight. Don't rinse them off. Just dump them in a colander or a little china cap or whatever your draining device vessel is.
And there's a ton of different beans you can go with. You can go with a white bean. You can go with a cannellini bean. You can go with a kidney bean, a black bean, black-eyed peas. You can throw in some corn, even though it's not technically a bean.
No, same thing. And peas. I think that, the interesting thing about this, that where you can really add a lot of really cool flavors. And again, you're talking about things that are inexpensive. Beans, probably the least expensive thing you can get besides rice. And rice would be something you can use in these too.
Well, you can take it different directions. So I just for fun pulled up a few different ideas. You can go Mediterranean. They're suggesting chickpeas and white beans, but it's got Kalamata olives, feta, capers, basil. Take it to a Mediterranean direction. If you want to do a Latin-inspired, you could do black beans and corn. You can add tomatoes and onions, cilantro and jalapeno and avocado.
Okay, so there's lots of beans that you can do for that.
Thank you so much for spending time with us. Until next time, we hope you'll be cooking up a storm in the kitchen. So we'll be with you again next week with food, flavor, and fun right here on Cooking Like a Pro podcast.